in there. 59.
I got my sound off my phone.
I think I'm going to have Jason introduce you. Isaac, what's your last name?
Schultz.
Schultz.
Strong German name. My grandfather was Martin Luther Schultz.
And Protestant?
Yeah, Lutheran.
Switch it up.
That's good, Ricka.
Hold on. For some reason, this just went, it reverted back.
Just gonna live stream our face.
I don't, there it is. Oh, it already went live, so.
Hey.
How do I? I think because it started while I was.
You're live?
Yep.
Good evening, everyone. Neil Sanford, Preview Properties, the Sanford team. Welcome to our home buyers seminar. We are putting this together. There's a lot of questions and a lot of concerns about buying right now, and hope that we can answer some of those questions and help guide you along the path to buying a home. Again, my name is Neil Sanford, the Sanford team. I've been selling real estate 32 years, and we've closed as a team over 2,700 properties. And I'm going to introduce one of our buyer's agents and agents that's been with us a number of years. How many years, Merle?
Since 2015.
2015. He works a lot with buyers and has a lot of knowledge, has a finance background. So I'll let Merle talk.
Hi, thanks for joining us. Thanks to Jason for putting this on and for Isaac for showing up tonight. We really appreciate it. So I've been in this business since 2015, but in my previous careers, I've been a banker and a commercial agribusiness insurance agent. So well versed on the business side. My big deal is to help people find a buyer or a seller for their home and make sure that they're happy when they get done and they don't get any financial trouble along the way. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jason.
Good. Hi, I'm Jason Bluer. I'm a buyer agent also on the Sanford team. I was going to go over a quick guide to the buying process and what you should expect and what you will need to accomplish to get a home bought. Number one, you need to find an agent, which we've got you covered. Number two, you will need to find a lender. That's why Isaac's here. And most of your agents can recommend a lender for you. You can find your own. I definitely recommend a local lender. A lot of the big banks that are not local don't have the pull to help you out in unique situations where your local lender can have a lot more leniency with guidelines for getting your mortgage underway. Once finding your lender, obviously, you're going to get a pre-approval letter. You're going to find out what kind of mortgage you qualify for. That can affect how much money you're going to need down. Again, Isaac's going to go over that when I'm finished here. That's one of the biggest reasons we're here tonight, is to learn about that kind of stuff and opportunities for you as a buyer from the financial aspect. First thing that you're going to need once you get an offer written on a house is your earnest money deposit, an EMD, which is typically around 1% of the purchase price of the home. You're going to need that turned into your realtor within 48 hours of the deal being accepted. That can be refundable if the inspection contingency is not met. You would get your money back. Once you're under contract and your EMD is turned in, you're going to schedule your inspection. Inspections typically around $300 to $600. You can do a very minimal inspection, or as far as doing pest radon, there's several other options you can add into the inspection to make sure your home is what you're looking for. Third week of the so that's about week 2 is your inspection. About week 3 is kind of a lull paperwork week. Usually, typically the end of week 3 is when the appraisal happens. The appraisal is between you and the lender. You will pay the lender for the appraisal. They are doing comps and stuff on the house to make sure the amount of money they're loaning you is suitable for the house you're purchasing. One thing that Mercantile does offer is they will bundle your appraisal fee into your closing costs, so it's not straight out of pocket for the appraisal. Typically, you pay for the appraisal before it happens. Once the appraisal's back, if the house appraises, you're smooth sailing. The final week of underwriting, your lender's going to ask you to update a lot of your paperwork, which gets a lot of frustrating for a lot of buyers because they've already turned it all in, but they're updating all your numbers and your information for the loan to close. It's important you get all that paperwork in as quickly as you can so you can get a clear to close. Once a clear to close is given by the lender, typically you will close in 2 to 5 business days after you have the clear to close. And about 24 hours before the closing, you'll do the final walkthrough of the property to make sure it's in good condition. And typically at the closing, you for sure will have to bring your current photo ID, and then your lender will instruct you of any other paperwork or funds that you will need to close on your home. So we hope you consider us for your real estate needs. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our lender, Isaac Schultz from Mercantile Bank.
All right. Well, that was a good synopsis of the home buying process. When it comes to the lending side of things, we kind of have to back up. So you've got the whole process once you're under contract and you've gotten with your agent, your offer's accepted. But what the heck are you doing before that? Well, ideally, you're coming either to me first, or you go to your realtor and they send you to me, because really what we want to do is work on getting you pre-qualified or pre-approved, so we know what you can afford and what things look like. Because you've got a budget, a lot of times you can get approved for much higher than you're willing to spend in that budget. So to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the mortgage process, the things that we're looking at are income, assets, and credit. Now, before all your eyes glaze over, I'm going to make these not too in-depth, but the idea with income is simple. Just, hey, are you working? How long have you worked for? Do you have 2 years of history? And then what kind of employment is that? Are you self-employed? Is it W-2? There's different things that go into that. Obviously, if you file a tax return, if you're self-employed, maybe you own a lawn care business, that's going to be a little more complicated than someone that's salaried with a company. And these are all factors that we're considering when we're working on getting you pre-qualified. And then from the asset perspective, that's all about how much money you have saved. Can we source that money? And then where or how much do you have for your closing costs? So one aspect of the asset portion that I think a lot of buyers are feeling kind of squeezed on right now is really the idea that in the last 3 years, saving money was tough. I mean, who could save money with everything that went on and everything we're dealing with now? The cost of living has risen, inflation is going crazy. So where do you have those funds, and do you have them saved? And so there are first-time homebuyer programs that we can offer, down payment assistance geared programs to help close that gap between what you have saved and what you need to close. So on that asset portion, if you're thinking to yourself, I don't have any money saved, how can I get a house? Well, that's where it's very important to talk to a lender because we can let you know about programs that you probably didn't even know existed. And then that last piece is that credit portion. That's pretty simple. What's your credit score and what's on your report? For some people, they might have old medical collections accounts. We see that all the time. You have a $50 account with the dentist. You forget to pay the bill and they kick it to collections after a week. Things like that affect your credit score. So knowing where it's at and knowing what's on your report is really important. I advise a lot of people to use things like Credit Karma, get an idea of your score, get an idea of what's on your report. That way you have a better base of knowledge for when you're coming to a lender. But a lot of times loan officers, we can get all those items, your credit pulled, and we can tell you what it all looks like. So once we've gotten all of those pieces of the puzzle together, that's when you'd be pre-qualified or pre-approved. And then you can start moving through the process that Jason was talking about. So he did a good job of explaining it. There's not a whole lot else to add to that. The things that you kind of need to watch out for, especially as a first-time buyer, are things like if you're using a down payment assistance loan, or if you're doing government-based lending. When Jason talked about the appraisal and comps that comparables that an appraiser might pull to establish value on a home, there are items where maybe you have a government-style loan and they're worried about things like peeling paint or things that they would consider health and safety on a home. Those are things that you have to watch out for. And as a first-time buyer, you want a lender that knows those things and can get ahead of them alongside their agent. Because I'm sure, Jason could tell you of all the deals he's done, if he's had some that had government lending, I'm sure he's had to go and sand down a few door frames, throw some new paint on there. So that's something that I think a lot of first-time buyers don't necessarily know, and it is part of the process. And then kind of alluding to what Jason said more near the end of the process, it might feel like we as loan officers just keep asking for the same documents over and over again. Well, part of the reason for that is documents actually do expire in our system. They're only good for a set amount of days, things like bank statements or pay stubs. And this is all government regulation that was placed on the industry to make sure that we're lending fairly and accurately. So even though it might feel like as lenders we ask for a lot of documents, you just have to work and do your best to get those documents in, even if it feels like they ask for the same bank statement 10 times. I know it. I went through the process myself. It can be frustrating. But if you get in there and you just send the same document as many times as they request it, you are going to end up having a smoother mortgage process than if you, I don't want to say fight, that's the wrong word. But if you're kind of going against us, or hey, I've already sent this document, it's typically easier just to send it in, because the mortgage process is complicated. It's not the simplest thing in the world. I mean, we're working to get mortgages to click button, get mortgage, but we are not there yet. It is going to take some time. But beyond all of those items, really, once you have your offer accepted and you're past your inspections, like Jason talked about, your appraisal is good, the process, it almost feels like nothing's happening. And it's because we're doing everything behind the scenes. We're making sure all your documents are good. We're making sure that we've cleared things with our underwriters. But really, the process as a whole, if you have the right guide as an agent and with a loan officer, it actually can be a pleasant experience. Believe it or not, every mortgage experience is not as bad as your neighbor tells you it is. But there are a lot of programs that you can look at that can help. And my advice is talk to a realtor, talk to a loan officer, talk to me. If you think that you can't get qualified for a home, maybe there's things on your credit that you think are disqualifying you. You won't know for sure until you talk to a professional. because that's really where the rubber meets the road with these things. I guess a Q&A session, maybe from the back behind us, before maybe I jump into a different topic. Anyone in the back? I can't be seen, but
What What kind of assistance do you have for down payment?
yeah. So when it comes to down payment, really the biggest agency that helps with down payment assistance is the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. That's MSHDA for short. They've made some changes to their programs, but across the board, they offer $10,000 in down payment assistance to qualifying first-time buyers. There's a couple catches there. The way that the assistance works is it's not free. No money is free. So they do place it as a second mortgage on the home. It's non-interest bearing. Payments are never required to be made. It's just paid in full if you sell the home, refinance, or change ownership. But I would say that's the biggest program for first-time buyers that I'm helping people with. There are some city-specific programs like the City of Lansing's down payment assistance, but MSHDA is by far the most robust. They've been around for a long, long time helping buyers. Yes.
And is there an income cap on that?
There is, yes. There's an income cap for MSHDA. It does change year on year. Obviously, the Housing Development Authority is always trying to keep up with inflation and increasing wages. So from time to time, they do increase that. It does depend on your county. But the thing that I tell most first-time buyers is it's probably higher than you think. If you've got a household of 1 to 2 people, just in Ingham County, you would be at $117,000 as a household gross for the year. And I know that leaves a lot of room for people, even some that might consider themselves, more in the upper middle class, but don't have money saved. MSHDA really tries to not be exclusionary in that regard.
Why do sellers prefer a conventional mortgage over an FHA mortgage?
Oh, that's good. Okay, so that's a question. Why would a seller consider a standard mortgage over government-based lending? Really, I mean, what it comes down to is one, I think a social stigma that government lending takes longer. There's more hoops that you have to jump through. There is some truth to that when it comes to appraisals. There are, peeling paint, health and safety requirements, but I really think at the end of the day, it comes down to when, I don't want to speak for listing agents, but when you're someone that wants to sell their home and you want to get paid and you almost want it to be a guarantee that you'll be paid, you're going to go with what you perceive to be the safest option. I think that really ends up being conventional mortgages have been around for a long, long time. Typically with government lending, there's a perception that maybe you're not as qualified, or maybe you're using this because you don't have enough money to put towards your down payment. So I think those stigmas can cause that. But I've closed a lot of deals with government style lending on a wider range of different houses, and it was very similar to your conventional deals.
As a follow-up, do I need 20% down?
That's a great question. So do you need 20% down? The Dave Ramseys of the world will tell you, yes, absolutely, you need 20% down because it should be a 15-year mortgage and 35% of your income. But really the reality is there's government regulation. There are minimum down payments on homes. The 20% mark has come around because there's something called private mortgage insurance, sometimes called PMI or MI. Private mortgage insurance, it's not homeowners insurance. It actually just protects the lender or the person that holds that mortgage. And between the 80% and 100% of the loan versus the value of the home, so 20% down, how much equity you have, there's a gap there, and lenders need to be protected if the home goes to foreclosure and it has to be sold as a short sale. Now, we don't want to get too much into the weeds, but really the idea there is the 20% mark allows you to avoid that private mortgage insurance monthly. So it's a good thing, but it's absolutely not a requirement. Many of the loan programs that we can access will give you as little as 3% down. And in some cases, even less. There are government options that give you 0% down, which really gives access to a lot of home buyers in the market that don't have money saved.
Can my parents give me some money to help me with that?
Yes. Okay. So can your parents give you money? Yes. Without getting into the nitty gritty of guidelines, what she might be referring to is what we would call a gift. So you can do a gift of funds in order to close a mortgage. The idea there being someone would gift you, and it really has to be a gift. There can't be an expectation of a repayment. Otherwise, we would consider that a loan. They would gift you money. You would take that and use it towards your closing costs. Now, if you're not aware of that, if you've got the bank of mom and dad willing to foot the bill to a degree for your closing costs and things, that's absolutely an option. And many times I do bring that up. Whether or not you're in a position to leverage that, that's between you and mom or whoever else. But absolutely, that's an option. Yeah, 100%.
And my other question is, do I need any other money besides the down payment?
Oh, very good. Yeah, I think that's a common misconception. When I talk to first-time buyers or even people that are considering buying a house and they tell me, well, I've got $10,000 to put down. Well, yeah, that's great. That's very good. I'm sure on most houses that's a sizable down payment, but there are other costs associated with mortgages. That's a great question. So you do have your down payment, but you also have your closing costs. So for your lender, they're going to charge some degree of probably a processing and underwriting fee. And then you'll also have costs from the title company. So they'll have fees for recording your mortgage, getting you insurance on the loan, things like that. And then you also have your escrow account. I like to say that's just a fancy word for your property taxes and your homeowner's insurance, right? I don't know why we gave it such a fancy name, but the escrow account is just for your property taxes and your homeowner's insurance. The reason why that's an added cost at the front end of the mortgage is because if you have tax bills that come due by the time you close, or the full home insurance bill that you need to pay, we have to collect those up front because then you can make your monthly installments once you close your loan. So yeah, a lot of people think, hey, I've got 10,000, I'm good to go. But really there's a lot of other costs involved in that. So it's always good to talk to either a realtor or a loan officer about that, because that's where you're gonna gain a lot of this knowledge and learn about these things.
What's the difference between pre-qualified letter and a pre-approval letter?
Oh, that's a great question. So not a lot of people know the difference. So the question was, what's the difference between a pre-qualification letter and a pre-approval letter? Really, the only big difference is whether or not we can verify your employment direct from your employer. So a pre-qualification letter would be a lender pulls your credit, and they're kind of taking your word for everything else. They can get documentation from you, absolutely, pay stubs, bank statements, things like that. But with a pre-qualification, a lot of times, really, it's just a credit pull. And if you tell me you make $20 an hour and you've got $10,000 saved, well, maybe not me, but a lot of lenders will take that and they'll run with it. They'll say, oh, great. Okay, awesome. Well, here's what you can afford. A pre-approval letter does allow a loan officer to go and verify your employment. They know exactly what you make. And then at that point, they are gathering additional documentation like bank statements, pay stubs. But I think the thing that people don't always understand is it really comes down to who's your loan officer and how good are they at their job. Because a pre-qualification can be just as good as a pre-approval letter, but it just depends on how much legwork they're doing up front. So for me, when I'm doing that, I'm pulling credit, I'm getting documentation. I want to be sure that I get you the most solid letter possible, because when you're out there shopping for homes, boy, does it feel bad to have the rug pulled out from under you. If you thought that you could be approved for this house, you get under contract and suddenly things change. So yeah, that's a great question.
What do closing costs typically run?
It can vary. I would say if you've got your lender and your title company, that's usually safe to say about 3,000. And then for your escrow account, it depends on the area that the home is in and when you're closing. Is there a full summer or winter tax bill due? But a lot of times I tell people between lender and title, if you call that $3,000, you're probably good. For the escrow account, you call that 4 or 5, you're probably okay. And then, whatever your down payment is, so maybe 3% of 100,000. So if you had 3,000, and maybe 4, then you would be at simple head math, 10 grand all in. And that kind of relates back to that question of, is the down payment the only thing that I have to cover? Well, based on those numbers, no, it's not. And if you have 10,000, you're not going to have any extra to put toward your down payment. So a lot of people don't necessarily understand that. But again, it's why you want to talk to a lender, a loan officer, or a realtor, somebody that is a professional in the industry. Oh, a couple more. Yeah, keep them going.
What's the, so somebody asked me, what's the major cause of a delay on the buyer's side for getting a mortgage approved?
Okay, great question. So this relates to when you're going through the mortgage process. So you have an accepted offer, you're under contract on a home. And the question was, what types of things actually delay the mortgage being approved? I mean, at a certain point, it almost feels like nothing's happening, right? Because it's all kind of behind the scenes. But a few things that I can point to for why a mortgage might stall out or not hit the approval date or closing date. Believe it or not, how quickly a borrower or a client, a buyer, is able to get documentation to us. That is one thing. I think sometimes the expectations aren't set correctly. So for me, when I'm working with people, I remind them that, hey, I have to get this documentation. I need your bank statement and your pay stub in order to get you back to my underwriting team, in order to keep the loan moving along. I think there's kind of a misunderstanding that when we're requesting those documents, they can get to them at any time, as long as I get them to my lender. But there are definitely tight timeframes that we need to adhere to. So sometimes documentation, other times it's just the appraisal. How fast was someone able to pick up the bid, someone being an appraiser? How quick could they get out to the property? Was the agent that is listing the house, were they able to let them in at that time? Did they have to reschedule? How far away is it? Is it up north? Is it close by? And then how quick was the appraiser able to turn that report back in? Obviously, everyone is very busy, and you kind of have to put things in your pipeline and get to them when you can. So I think the appraisal, getting documentation in, and sometimes it's just good old wacky stuff, things that are just out of your control. I've had deals where it looked like a driveway was shared between 2 homes, and it was required that we get a shared driveway agreement. That's something that you can't really plan for. So you roll with the punches and try to get it done. But that can absolutely add time to a transaction. Yeah, 100%.
Isaac, you touched on closing costs. We've had some discussion about that. What, first time home buyers, particularly short on funds, what options are there available for them going to closing and having help with those closing costs?
Yeah. So kind of going back to the last 3 years, it was tough to save. It's been a crazy market. The economy's, been crazy, inflation and everything else. If we weren't able to save money as a consumer, what options do we have? So to kind of give a concise list, we do have our down payment assistance. So that would be kind of more your government lending. That would be a state-run agency giving you money towards your closing costs. So something like MISHDA or maybe the City of Lansing's down payment assistance program. You could also get a gift of funds from family or someone similar, and that would be they gift you funds. They don't expect repayment. You can use those towards your closing costs. There's also Seller concessions. Now, you don't want to get into the weeds with that, but if you think of seller concessions as cash value in a home that a seller might offer to you to put towards your closing costs, that is one option. That's definitely something you want to talk to your realtor about. I'm not an expert on seller concessions, but it is an option you can look at. And then Mercantile specifically does have our extra credit program. So the bank is committed to gifting first-time buyers $2,500 toward their closing costs. Of course, you have to qualify within the parameters we've set. But if you're short on cash, but you're not, totally without, sometimes that can help close the gap. But other than that, I mean, I hate to say it, but sometimes it's just about saving money. You can, bank on a tax return. Tax returns are easy for us to qualify. So if you get your refund from a tax return, that can be used towards your closing costs. But there's a number of options. I think really it boils down to, if you think you're not ready, you should talk to someone first. Be absolutely sure that what you think is true, because in many cases you might think you can't be qualified, but really you can be. Yeah.
Sometimes I've had buyers get a little surprised when they get to the closing part and the closing costs are much more than they were guessing they were going to be. How can they be informed of what their closing costs are going to be?
That's a great question. So you get to the closing table, you see your final closing disclosure, you look at that cash to close required from you, the borrower, and you say, what the heck is that? I don't remember ever going over that. I don't think I can afford that. Or that's really wiping out my savings. What changed here? Well, there's a number of things that could have changed throughout the process. But I think the biggest thing as a first-time buyer that you can do to try and mitigate that is ask for a loan estimate. That is a government instituted document. It's the same across every lender or loan officer or company you talk to, the loan estimate. That will give you a breakdown of costs. Now, when you get that, ask questions. Ask your loan officer, what's this? What's that? Can this change? Can that change? Is this my final number? No, that's not your final number. Okay, well, what's it going to be closer to? Because a good loan officer is going to be heading you off at the pass with that stuff. They're going to have an estimate for what your closing costs will be. And typically they're not far off that number. But if you're with maybe a bigger box mortgage person and they're not going over those numbers with you, ask for a loan estimate and maybe even ask for a second opinion. Plenty of times I've looked over documents for borrowers that I'll never see a paycheck for because I care about buyers, especially first-time ones. You don't ever want to get to the closing table and feel like you were sold one thing, but now you're buying another. Yeah, that's a great question. Yes.
Are there advantages to a 15-year mortgage over a 30-year mortgage?
That's a great question. So when it comes to mortgage terms, 30-year, 20-year, 15-year, there are advantages and there are disadvantages. The good thing to know is that it really has no bearing on getting your offer accepted, getting to closing. It's all the same when it comes to actually closing on the home. But when you're actually looking at mortgages, the advantages of a 30-year versus a 15-year, in the 30-year camp, typically your monthly payment is going to be lower because it's a longer term that we're amortizing the loan over. So it does make your payments a lot more affordable. I think that's the biggest thing for most buyers. Now, what you get for your interest and what it's all going to cost. Typically on a 30-year, that is going to be higher because it's a longer period that the actual lender or creditor is going to get paid through. So you got to think, if you hold that mortgage for 30 years, I mean, the creditor's waiting 30 years to get the final penny on that mortgage. So when you're looking at a 15-year, some of those advantages are, though your monthly payment is higher, you are paying it off much quicker. So think 30 versus 15. Your term is going to be much lower. Typically, the actual cost of it, so like what a rate might be, that's going to be lower because your creditor is getting paid faster. The 20-year kind of sits in the middle. I think it's just sort of an in-between. But when it comes to 30 versus 15, I really think it's about how quickly can I get this paid off, and how good of a deal, am I getting, all things considered. Now, if you have the funds and you can afford the payment on a 15-year mortgage, I think it's great. I think you're not going to be holding on for it for too long, and you'll build a lot of equity because you'll have more of your payment going towards your principal or the actual balance on the loan, rather than interest. But that's a great question. A lot of people don't necessarily understand that if you go from a 30-year to a 15-year, that monthly payment will be higher. But in the end, I think it is good for you as a borrower if you can afford it.
I'm thinking about a career change. Is that gonna mess up my possibility of getting a house?
Yes. So when it comes to your job, so the income portion of a mortgage, that's a great question. What if I want to change jobs? What if I'm getting promoted? What if I'm transferring departments inside my current job? Those are all things that your loan officer needs to know about, and you have to bring it up before you make the change, because everything can affect a mortgage in a million different ways. But especially if you're changing jobs, my best advice I can give to you without getting in the weeds at all is talk to your loan officer. Make sure they're aware. If you think you're going to change jobs, there's a lot of things that we need to vet and pay attention to. It can be done. You can change jobs in the middle of a mortgage. We've seen it done. But you got to make sure people know, because it's very similar to that credit portion of the loan. So when we talk about income, assets, and credit, a lot of people think, okay, well, I'm going to change jobs. I'm getting a higher wage. This is better for me. It's a promotion in a way to move to another company. Sometimes you can think the same thing about getting a car loan. Well, I need this new car. It's a better car for me. It's better for my family. But any kind of hard inquiries on your credit, any kind of new debt you might take on, because you got to think about that monthly payment aspect, right? Because that does affect what the mortgage looks like. These are all things that if ever you're thinking about making a decision, I've even told people, if you're thinking about changing toothpaste, you should probably just call me, because it doesn't matter what it is. You can talk to me. We're not going to be annoyed that you called. We're actually going to be happy that you got ahead of it, because it means that we know exactly what we need to do. So yeah, as a first-time buyer, that's very important to pay attention to. Yeah, over there.
What are the possible tax advantages, income tax advantages for first-time home buyers versus renting?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I really like saying this today without getting into the weeds. I'm not a tax professional, but I mean, I'm sure you've heard it. When you're paying rent, you're paying money to your landlord. He's paying for his mortgage. You're not seeing anything from that, right? You're just making payments to him, and he's footing the bill for everything else. When it comes to a mortgage, there are ways that in your taxes, when you file, you can get certain reimbursements and things for paying interest on a mortgage. Again, not a tax professional, but much like credits for having a child, things like that. The government does give incentives because really, ultimately, they want you to be buying a home. We don't want a generation of just renters for a whole multitude of reasons. So there are a lot of ways that the government will help incentivize you when it comes to buying a home. Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions out there?
How long is a pre-approval good for?
Oh, that's a great question. So not a lot of people know this, but when you're issued a pre-qualification letter or pre-approval letter, the only reason that it expires is because of things that we just don't know. And one of those things is your credit report. So a credit report is good for 120 days before it expires. At that point, many lenders say that your letter has effectively expired. And the reason for that being, if I were to re-pull your credit to get an idea of what things look like again, and you went out and that Maserati was looking nice in the lot and you just had to have it. I've been there. That could change your whole credit situation. It could change your whole approval situation. So that's why we put those periods on those letters. Typically, a lot of lenders will set them to 60 or 90 days just to be safe. But for the credit report, it's 120 days. So, I mean, beyond that, definitely an unknown. And I think,
What are interest rates going to do?
well, when it comes to the market, nobody has a crystal ball, but I will say one thing about markets just as a whole, that they come and go. If you were to ask your granddad, what was it like buying a house in the 80s? He'd tell you his story about how rates were in the double digits, and he still bought a house. Times come and go. The market really should not dictate whether you are or are not ready to buy a house. You have to look at the whole picture. Can I afford it? Is this right for me and my family? Is this the right time? Am I going to move out of state in a year? Well, maybe it isn't the right time to buy. But the market and what's happening, I mean, it makes a difference, but it's definitely not the be all end all. I would put it lower on the stack than you'd think. I think with that, I'll hand it off to Neil, the distinguished leader here.
Well, thank you for attending tonight. As we wrap up, I think it's become, at least to me, real clear how important it is to have a lender that you can work with and get answers and ultimately end up with a pre-approval letter. And then when you're ready to go seek a good agent, we have systems in place for working with buyers. And then once you get the offer and then working through the closing with Jason talked about the steps. That is all, there's a long checklist of all the things that are done to get to the closing successfully. And we work with you to help you, let's say there's problems with an inspection and something needs to be repaired, help negotiate that so that you end up successful and close on your home. That's the ultimate goal. Jason, Merle, anything you want to add tonight?
Thanks for taking the time to listen.
Yep. Thank you. Good night.
Off.